Yes, we are here. It is Draftmas Eve, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Gold Zone, the final edition of this show before the draft hits. And if you want a draft guide before tomorrow, you got some light reading going. If you're an idiot like me and took the day off tomorrow, because it's Christmas Day, we should get that day off, shouldn't we? But we don't, for whatever reason that is. And my boss laughed at me when I told him why I was taking that day off. And I said, you just don't understand. It's a religious holiday. And that's okay. You don't have to understand. It's my religion. It's my holiday. So we'll figure that out. But if you want an opportunity, you can still buy the Green Bay Draft Guide for $9.99. Get yourself up to date with the draft. Because granted, listen, guys, Green Bay is going to pick once tomorrow, maybe twice. I don't think there's a scenario where they don't pick at all. But they're only going to pick one or two players tomorrow. There's still so many guys you got to learn about. So that draft guide is good for you for the next 3 days. And I know you guys read on the toilet like I do. So you need something to read. That's perfect. And it gets you away from your kids and your wife. And your wife's not going to come in and check on you if that's what she thinks you're doing. So just grab what you need to get. I'm happy you thought that was funny, Morley. Welcome to the show.
I'm laughing at you, and I'm laughing at what Iowa Joe just said about the FaceTime thing.
Oh, yeah, Jesus. We'll start there. We'll get there in just a minute. I'm your host. I'm Jacob Westendorf. I'm joined, as always, by Jacob Morley. We've got a fun-filled, packed show for you guys tonight. Eric Edholm from NFL.com joined us earlier. You will get an interview with him and Jacob Morley. Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers is going to join us. And we'll have a couple laughs or two along the way. And, of course, at the end of the show is the draft, which I am the reigning champion for. I nailed 3 of the Packers picks last year. Morley, you got 1.
I got none.
You got none.
I got none. I got egged. Ghosted.
Ross got Christian Watson. That's how that worked. Okay. So I'm going to give Morley 1 out of pity, which, pretty similar to Mrs. Morley there, is giving things out of pity. So I understand that too. Let's get into this, guys. The joke that is running, of course, is, did I make sure to FaceTime Morley before the show? Aaron Rodgers had his, you know what? You're right, True North Packers fan. I didn't even notice that. So I'm going to move this. See, look at that. Isn't that much better? Yeah, we're on the right side now. Aaron Rodgers has been traded. The saga, if you will, is over. Morley, you and I have talked. This was just a matter of time. And the time has hit. 2nd round pick, conditional first, all that stuff. Aaron Rodgers spoke today. He responded to the, I don't want to call them allegations because that's a little strong, but the point that Gutekunst made that the Packers tried to reach Rodgers several times and he didn't respond. And Rodgers' response was, if I don't have great cell service in my house, and if you want to reach me, it needs to be by FaceTime. I need to see your face if I'm going to talk to you. To which later, Brian Gutekunst had his media availability and was asked whether there was truth to that or not. And Gutekunst kind of laughed and was like, maybe this is conjecture for me. It certainly could, but kind of like trying not to roll his eyes, but was basically like, I don't even know what to say to that. And which was good for a chuckle from me. And just kind of go through the whole thing. He wants to move on. Gutekunst, I thought, was very professional in terms of, and Rodgers too, quite frankly. I mean, he lied about that thing, but Rodgers is a liar. Liars lie. That's what they do. But otherwise, everything else, his Instagram posts, all the goodbyes. This seems like a quote unquote amicable divorce. It's like when the friend gets divorced and posts on his Facebook that, wife and I decided to get divorced. We still want to remain friends. Everything's good. But behind the scenes, they're both like, I hate that person. Like, I think if you got truth serum into Gutekunst, he would just say, like, I'm so happy I don't have to deal with this freaking guy anymore. But Morley, what was, just real quick, what's your takeaway from his media availability today, if anything? And then let's get into the draft stuff.
I mean, the last 24 hours have been the Aaron Rodgers experience to a T. The post yesterday that he made about gratitude and all that stuff got you in your feels, made you really appreciate everything he's done for this team, as you should. Obviously, he's been a joy to watch. He's been one of the most talented guys to ever throw the football on this planet. And then the next day he comes out and lies. It's just like he thinks we're stupid. That's what it is. Like, he could have said 1,000 things other than, oh, I couldn't get a hold of me. You got to face. Could have just said, hey, that chapter is over. I'm excited to be a New York Jet. Like, could have said something like that, but he had to have the last word. Had to have it. He had to get people to be like, oh, see, Aaron's. They couldn't reach him. Goody, yeah. You didn't know you had to FaceTime him? Come on, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so ridiculous that he would actually expect any of us to believe that. And he also threw out there, hey, guess what? He's not our quarterback anymore. Don't have to worry about it. Like, that's kind of like the final thing. Like, okay, that was weird. One more weird thing. Just don't talk about the Packers anymore until you're back. When you want to come back to Green Bay, when your playing days are done, we will welcome you back with open arms. I will have full wingspan out, ready to embrace you as a Green Bay Packer, as they put your name in that ring of honor, and we will let the good times roll. But man, I'm ready for a break. And the way I put it, I was with John. John
Papa, yeah, the sports lead.
Yeah, and so we were talking about this too, and it's like, man, it's when it's everyone's been in that relationship that you want to break up with the person, but you don't want to do it. You're like, oh, this is gonna suck. It's just gonna suck. But then once you've done it and it's done, it is just like you just feel that sense of relief. And I feel like that is where we are at right now. Just sense of relief as Packers fans that, yes, we're sad that Aaron's gone, grateful for everything he did, but like, we're ready to move on. We don't know what the future holds. It's unexpected, but we're ready for that unexpected adventure. And speaking of unexpected adventures and optimism and hope, we've got the most optimistic 3 days coming up.
Yeah.
I mean, it does not get better. Everyone's a winner. Everyone's going to the Super Bowl. Everyone's team just drafted a dozen Hall of Fame players, this weekend. And that's the beauty of the draft. We know that's not true, but a little piece of us and all of us believes that every player they took could be that guy to get you over the top. You know what I mean? And that is what's so much fun about it. That's why it is Draftmas.
That it is. Welcome here. I will say this, Iowa Joe, which, by the way, if you guys are not doing anything tomorrow, Iowa Joe and his friends will be hosting a live draft stream. So if you want to check those out, him and Nick Gregory and some others might pop in along the way as well. But he said he thought it was interesting. Gutekunst said there's no issues on his end when it comes to Rodgers coming back. I think that's true to a point. The Charles Robinson report that Rodgers wanted Gutekunst fired 3 years ago as a condition of him coming back. I don't know how you just get past that and everything's all hunky-dory. Like, I really do. I think these two guys just put on a happy face for a couple years, and Rodgers realized, and at some point it was important. I give Gutekunst credit for swallowing his pride, because I don't think I could do it. Like, I've worked with people who have tried to get me fired, and I could not work with them any longer. Like, that has happened in my real life job, and I transferred very quickly. That's just kind of how that worked. So, and I apologize. It's Friday night live stream Outback Packers. Big B's in the house. What's up, Big B? I hope they draft the next Jamal Williams just for you this weekend. But yeah, it's Draftmas. We're moving on. It's over. I give Gutekunst credit for the way he's done things. He's handled this about as well as you possibly can. Since the pick happened, like I said, I think he would tell you he could have done some things a little bit differently at that point. And then right after the Packers pick tomorrow, there will be a game on Wisconsin Space, which I may very well be a part of as well. We'll see what happens. I'm traveling this weekend. I am a minister, so all of you sinners are going to hell. I'm officiating my cousin's wedding this weekend is why I'm a minister. So I'm sorry that I have just condemned you all to hell, but that's where we're at. Rodgers is no longer a Packer. Jordan Love is. There's a lot of things that we can talk about with that. I do want to save those for after the draft, because really I do want this to just be a happy show. But there's a lot of things that are kind of on the line right now. Like I've kind of been arguing is probably a strong term, but talking through it with some Packers fans on Twitter that Brian Gutekunst might not be the general manager 1 year from now. Like, if this next season goes, and honest, and granted, the season would have to be an absolute abject disaster for that to happen. But some of these people that are in my mention saying, no, this is just a grace period year. Whatever happens, Gutekunst, LaFleur, and Love, they get 2 years guaranteed. I don't think that's true, and I don't think it should be. Because I've said about 1,000 times, if you're picking number 1 overall, then everything's on the table. You go 3-14, you go 4-13, everything's on the table. And that means, sorry, this is a tough business. The reality of the situation would be if that happened. Back-to-back losing seasons. So that's on the coach. That's on the general manager as well to some degree, but that part is on the coach. A 4-13 season, I'm sorry, I just don't know many scenarios. And Morley is the biggest Jordan Love fan, apologist, whatever word you want to say in the world. I can't see a scenario where they're 4-13 and Jordan Love is just playing lights out football. And they're just like, yep, that's the guy. Gotta be. We went 4-13, but that's the guy. Can't picture that. And with Gutekunst, it would be, this is the quarterback you picked. And I'm sorry, all context, all of that stuff that goes around this pick would go out the window. The reality would be this draft pick pushed arguably the best franchise player in franchise history out the door. That's part of what happened. So if it turns into a disaster, if it turns into a clown show next year, Brian Gutekunst might not be the general manager. Matt LaFleur might not be the head coach, and Jordan Love very well might be one and done. But that's enough doom and gloom. Let's get to the happy stuff. We had Eric Edholm on earlier, and Morley was able to talk through with him. So guys, enjoy Eric Edholm, one of our friends, good friends of NFL.com.
All right, we are joined now by NFL.com's very own Eric Edholm. Eric, how you doing, man? You've got all this work, everything leading up to it happens in the blink of an eye, and then you turn the page and it's square one again. Am I right?
I know. Yeah, I'm going to start on my 2024 tape maybe next week. You know, I don't want to put the cart before the horse or anything like that. But
see the family and kids and stuff like that.
They deserve their dad for at least a day, I would think, right? You know,
I do have. So you're married, and
I am.
How does your wife handle draft weekend? Does she just kind of know at this point? And I ask you because this is my first draft weekend with my wife. We got married in October. I think she's got an idea just because she's seen me down in the man cave, you know, writing and doing that stuff and disappearing for hours at a time. But I don't know if she really knows how much of me she's not going to see for the next 3 days.
Yeah, that's the thing. So we celebrated our 10th anniversary last year. We're coming up on 11 pretty soon here. You know, we've been through a few wars, a few battles. We've had 2 kids. We had twins that came both at the same time.
Wow.
She is now fully immersed in draft season. But what makes this year particularly tough is that she's on call this week. She's only on call once every 35, 40, 45 weeks. I mean, it's basically once every 10 months or something like that. It just happened to fall on this week, and she's back in Chicago. I'm here in Kansas City. Other than the good morning and love you texts, I've been staying clear and hoping she's okay. She's pretty strong though. So
Kansas. Hey, how are you enjoying the fine city of Kansas City so far?
I've had barbecue, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I've only been here a day and a half, and it's been pretty good. So
I don't know. I live in Kansas City. So I live in Kansas City. So I am in Kansas City, Missouri right now. We could have just done this. Heck, we could have just done this live from studio. But yeah, have you been to Joe's KC? Have you been to Arthur Bryant? Q39. I mean, man, people are going to experience Kansas City to its fullest. But beyond that, Eric, obviously this is a Packers show. It's been silly season going on for the Packers, and it is so weird because for the longest time, it really didn't feel like draft season for the Packers just because you had that big, massive thing hanging over your head. That was Aaron Rodgers. And what is this going to happen or is this not going to happen? Let me get your reaction first and foremost. When that went down, when the trade, the compensation rolled through your screen, what was your initial reaction about that whole deal?
Well, funny enough, I had done a radio show about 10 minutes before, and they said, when is this getting done? And I said, I'm pretty sure it is, but the timing of it could be close to the first round of the draft. I thought it might happen Wednesday, Thursday, even possibly going into Friday night. Now we know obviously they flipped the the 2 first-round picks there. But yeah, I mean, my reaction was probably like a lot of other people. Okay, glad that's done. Glad we got that finished. You know, I've been saying all along, I've been leery about the idea of Rodgers just, taking like flying in on his magic carpet and delivering a Super Bowl title. I don't think that's going to be the most likely scenario that happens, but fascinated to see how he's going to fit in, especially in a loaded AFC. And for the Packers, it's a chance to finally get eyes on Jordan Love all these years after drafting him. And, first hearing that Drew Lock was a possibility. Then the next year, the Love thing happens, and it's played out just like Rodgers Favre almost in so many parallels. But I think both teams were motivated to make this thing happen, put the story behind us, get into draft mode, and keep fixing their teams, because obviously both have designs on winning this year.
All right, who won the trade? 3, 2, 1, go.
Green Bay. I mean, I just honestly, to get the salary off the books, to move on from the drama and get pretty darn good return as well. I mean, that's the trifecta right there, in my opinion. Look, I would say this whether I was on a Jets show or not. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not biased for your sake, and I just think they did a great job. And you could argue in a tough situation, not every team was banging down their door looking to get Aaron on their team. So it worked out pretty well, I think.
And I think, you hit the nail on the head too. It's like, let's say Rodgers does come in on his magic carpet with no shoes on, and he wins a Super Bowl for them. I think at that point you would be able to sit back as a Packers fan and be like, obviously it was worth it. Obviously it was worth it for New York. But like you mentioned already, that is a tough division to get out of, let alone conference, so it's going to be interesting. And for the Packers in themselves, I've said this already, I think on Pack-A-Day, for a team that looking through it, not through your green and gold lenses, this Packers team they're not competing for a Super Bowl this year. If they do, if that is the case, then everything went right. Everything went right. And I just don't see that happening. I think they can be competitive. I think they can be more competitive than maybe some people give them credit for. But in any case, just from a fan's perspective of the pure entertainment value of watching this team this year, you get to see the young kid in Jordan Love. You get to see some of the other young talent. And then if that doesn't pan out, you've got 2 first-round picks coming next year. Then what? The hope is in the future still. And this was a team in November that we looked at, and it was bleak. It was, you got this quarterback, 39-year-old, you owe him the world as far as money. And how do you move on from this guy? How does this actually happen? It's like wanting to break up with someone and not knowing how you're going to do it. And then once it's over, you're just kind of like, like it's done. And I don't know what the future is, but it's not my past. I'm not at that point anymore. And like that gives, I think, some fans a certain sense of relief, a certain sense of optimism for the future. I was going to say, I agree. Just go and speaking of the future, speaking of optimism, there is no more optimistic time in the NFL than what we're about to embark on in the next 3 days. The NFL draft, I think that is why it's so appealing. Hope springs eternal. You don't know if you just drafted the next best player to ever play at that position. You don't know if you just drafted Patrick Mahomes or Ed Reed or, name your Hall of Fame generational talent. You just have no idea. And everyone wants to assume that, which is kind of fun too, even with like your 5th and 6th round guys. You're like, you never know. You never know. And you don't never know. That's why it's so much fun. But speaking of the draft and speaking of what we're about to get into, the Packers pick at 13 now, traded up 2 spots. I think it's interesting when you read kind of the tea leaves of what Brian said when he mentioned, he's like, we didn't move up 2 spots for no reason. And there are some rumors and some whispers out there that the trade potentially could have involved a 4th round pick, but instead the Packers took the move up. And it makes sense because that's about similar value. So when you see something like that and just being as familiar with the first round as you are, 2 picks, a lot of people might say that's nothing. That's 2 picks. But at that point in the draft, it can be the difference between getting the guy you really want and not. So if they did move up 2 spots, and if Brian is not bluffing by saying they moved up 2 spots for a reason, for a particular player, who do you think, I mean, just just knowing what you know, who do you think is the target, or do you think there's a list of guys that they like?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a short list. I mean, I'm sure there are 2 or 3 that are their kind of primary targets, and they should have a pretty good feel for how things are going to go once the first couple selections, assuming a trade doesn't happen prior to the draft. I think what they'll probably do is kind of monitor how the first 4, 5, 6 picks go. If we see a flurry of quarterbacks, maybe a trade up isn't necessary. They could even possibly entertain the idea of trading back, right? You're just increasing your value. And yeah, I mean, like you mentioned the 4th round versus the moving up 2 spots in round 1. There are some teams who say take the extra selection, the extra day 1, the extra day 1 pick, 2 spots higher doesn't matter that much. And, we may still be able to get who we want at our spot, but you could read it one of 2 ways. Either, they want to keep moving up and they think there's an opportunity to do that, or you could say they really want to get it ahead of New England at 14 and that they may be looking at some of the same players. So in my final mock, they were still picking 15th at the time prior to the trade going down when I sent it in, and then got a call from an editor saying, hey, what do you want to do with this thing? But I gave him Miles Murphy there. It was a player who I'm not necessarily in love with, but I think fits their mold very much and sort of what they're looking for in an edge rusher, checks off a lot of those boxes. And I think kind of looks, and you don't know Gary's, health right now, and Preston long-term obviously needs someone behind that. It would fit the way they drafted Gary. It would follow in a very similar pattern to that, but I could see receiver, Jackson Smith and Jigba's been a name that's been attached there quite a bit. I've even heard tight end is not out of the question. I don't know if 13 is the spot you're taking a tight end, but it's a position that has been attached to them before. So offensive line, guard position is currently open. They may have some long-term need at left tackle, assuming this is Bakhtiari's last year. So yeah, I mean, those are the 3 directions position-wise that make the most sense to me. And obviously, if Paris Johnson goes early and Darnell Wright, who's been rumored to be a top 10 pick all of a sudden, if they're gone, are they the ones trading for them, or are they going to sit back and now pivot to another position? That's kind of how I would triage the situation right now.
Yeah, it would be fascinating to me, just the reaction from Packers fans if they trade up and it's not for Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah.
Just because, and to an extent, I would get that, but also to an extent, it's a big man's game, guys. And if you want to insulate Jordan Love, then man, you can do it just as well with one of those big fellas. And and part of me is very much on board with the, hey, Brian and Matt completely are putting it all on the table for this young kid in Jordan Love, and them not to go out and get him weapons or not get him what he needs to succeed. I can't see that happening. Right. And the other thing Packers fans have to remember too, is they've got 2 second-round picks now. They could very much feel comfortable with getting their weapons and their pass catchers at that point in time as well, or have the flexibility to move back up into the first round if that were the case as well. So that will be interesting. But another question I wanted to ask you about the draft and this whole deal, and we talk about the craziness of it, and it is crazy, so it's going to be hard for you to answer this question. I'm sure if you knew the answer, then you'd be in Vegas or something. But if you had to guess at a prospect maybe sliding that we did not expect to be available at pick 13, if you had to guess, what would you take your dart throw at?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good question. It's tough because it's not one of those years where the top 10 has felt maybe set in stone. I don't sit there and say, oh gosh, if this guy falls, it's going to be a complete shock. We've heard Bijan Robinson's range is maybe 8 to 18. Okay, so he kind of dips his toe in the top 10, but he's not a guarantee. Nolan Smith is a player who's been mentioned as a top 10 possibility. I don't know how high he could go, to be honest, but maybe that same kind of range as Bijan. So, I would guess that Lucas Van Ness, who's been mocked quite a bit in that range, very well could be on the clock for them. Smith and Jigba, I think is going to be there in that range too. Again, you never know. 12 at the Houston is a possibility especially if they go quarterback and go Stroud at 2. I know that's up in the air still, but yeah, I mean there's some real possibilities that both. Well, certainly Paris Johnson is going to be a tough one at 13. I don't think he makes it there. I think that would have to move up if he's their guy. Skoronski, even though I mocked him to, I think, 14 in New England, I'm starting to hear that he's a decent bet at the top 10 there. So, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit tricky to handicap right now, but I would be surprised if there weren't already 2 corners taken, and Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez are the most likely to be gone in the top 10. Yeah, I think it's really going to end up being Nolan Smith, Lucas Van Ness, probably at least 2 of the offensive linemen, let's say the top 4, if you will, are going to be there. But I think there's a good chance that Paris Johnson's going to be a little bit out of reach. And if they want him, they're going to probably have to move up.
Well, and then so 2 names you didn't mention, so I'm just assuming you think they're going to be gone. Will Anderson is someone I think most people assume is a top 5 pick. Lock it in. There were some whispers about some of his medicals kind of throughout this process, which I don't think anyone really reported because I don't know if it's true or not. But then another guy that recently I saw a couple people had him like in the 11 to 12 range was the Tyree Wilson kid out of Texas Tech. And he's someone that, again, I think he's going high. Like, I think I've heard plenty of buzz about him to even as high as Arizona at 3. But he's someone that you go back and look at it, then, well, he didn't test. He's got the foot. Maybe he is sitting there at 13. Maybe he's someone that he's hard to place. Maybe someone surprises and, they take player X instead of this guy, or someone takes Nolan Smith instead of him, or they like Big Van Ness more than him, or they like Miles Murphy more than him. And then before you know it, he's sitting there at pick 13. Is that something that, because you nailed it too. It's like, tell me who the top 10 picks are. Okay, well, I can tell you like 2 guys I'm sure that I'm positive are going to be there, are going to go. And so beyond that, it is tough. And I think ultimately there's going to be a really good football player sitting there for the Packers at 13.
I do too. I don't think it's Wilson. Let me not to, douse your wild. No, I don't know it for certain, but I think Houston having 2 of those picks in the top 12 right now, currently, they're obviously subject possibly to move. They're a team that I think has been making some calls, but I think they would have a hard time passing on him twice. Again, but if let's say he did get past 2 and started creeping into the back end of the top 10, this is not a massive leap for any team picking 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that range, that you can make that kind of a jump pretty readily. So I think there's a chance that if the Texans did go quarterback at 2, then all of a sudden all bets are off.
Yeah.
But I think Wilson is in play at 2. I really do.
I do too. Yeah.
So yeah, it would take, and then the Eagles are in that mix too, and they love that kind of body type. I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch for me, but I agree with the big picture, what you said. I mean, I think Murphy will be on the clock. I think Smith and Jigba is a decent possibility to be there 50-50, depending on what Houston does at 12. Obviously there are other quality players, including offensive linemen, who could be available. So I'd be shocked if we got to 13 and felt like, what are they going to do? Or what, they don't have any options here. That's not how I feel how it's going to lay out. Even if this isn't one of those years where, the top 13 picks is going to blow anyone's hair away.
Yeah. And I think that's the other part of it too, is I think picks 10 to 50 could get weird, just because I think a lot of people's boards are going to have similar grades on guys kind of in that range of, someone had him as player 48 on their board, but Heck, like the Texans are a great example of that. They took Kenyon Green at 14 last year. They have kind of been that wacky off the wall team that their board might look different than other people's. So,
Yep.
We've been talking about Smith and Jigba to Houston. What if they love Zay? Zay Flowers is a kid that for a long time we heard about him as could be the first receiver off the board. Yep. Well, maybe it's to Houston, and so it's just, it is wild. It is fun. And I think that's why we love it. Eric, one last thing before I let you go here.
Sure.
But if you are the Packers, if you are Brian Gutekunst, and you have the option, actually, let me rephrase it this way. Because what I'm trying to get at is I'm talking about Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of Packers fans don't realize about him is they would use him in a very similar fashion that they would use Jackson Smith and Jigba. If you got to have, that pass catcher, top 13 guy where they're going to be.
Right.
Let's say the Packers take him at 13. That's probably not ideal for them. I think they would like to move back for Kincaid. But if he works out, if he's not injured, which of course those things are true, he didn't work out and he did have the back. Is 13 a stretch for him? Or is he even a stretch now?
If he had worked out and hadn't had the back issue questions, I think he would absolutely be discussed in that range. So if you feel good about the medical update that his doctor has sent out, it's still a concern, mid-back injury. Then again, Rob Gronkowski came into the draft with similar types of questions. He had missed the entire season.
Do you remember Travis Kelce when he came in? He had the dreaded micro fracture stuff on the knee.
He did.
And he's been still
okay.
playing. He's been pretty good. He's older. He's like what? He's 34, and it shocks people when people realize that he's that old because he doesn't look like it. So
I know, yeah. And I'm not going to say Kincaid is going to become Kelce.
No,
I'm just saying if there's a player style wise who I can compare it to, that's pretty close. I mean, he plays with some zest. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got pretty good size, and really isn't going to be a massive people mover as a blocker, but, ask Chiefs fans if they care about that with Kelce, right? So I just think he's got terrific movement skills. I can't wait to find out what the real wingspan length was. He apparently measured like 3 inches shorter at his pro day than he did at the combine. So we've got to figure out a better way to do these measurements, but I don't think anyone's sitting there too concerned. He's got natural hands. This is a great story too. This is a kid who had to walk on at University of San Diego 5 years ago. No one in their right mind viewed him as a first round pick, or much less an NFL prospect. So, in the last really 2+ years, he has turned himself into a tremendous performer. And you watched him play through that injury of that last game. I mean, he gutted it out and still had 4 catches, 60 yards or whatever it was. And I think he's going to be big time if he stays healthy. So yes, right now 13 feels early. 5 years from now, we may look back and say, how did X number of teams pass on this guy?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Eric, where can we, obviously NFL.com, but where are you going to be at this weekend? What are you doing?
Yep, I'll be at the draft doing some pick-by-pick analysis Friday and Saturday, and I'll do some news stuff on Thursday night, which is obviously the big, the introduction of the draft. Round 1 is always a lot of activity and high-profile picks, so a lot to do before I leave town. I'm excited though, and it's a great city. I haven't been back in many years. I went to Mizzou down the road back in college, and I always wished I had spent more time in Kansas City and got to know it a little earlier. So it's a cool place for the draft, and I think it's going to be a fun weekend.
Awesome, man. Well, enjoy your stay.
No reason. Stop unmuting me.
Nobody wants to hear you.
No, apparently not. I don't need to go through the goodbyes and everything like that. Thank you to Eric Edholm for joining us and talking some draft with us. Morley, you did the interview, obviously. So what were some of your big takeaways there?
I think it's interesting that he mentioned that he thought Smith and Jigba would be there at 13. And I think the more we get these, big time media types final mock drafts, I think it's kind of clear that no one really knows anything. And I think Eric kind of talked about that as well. When it's like, hey, tell me who your top 10 guys are. Well, I know probably Bryce Young and Will Anderson are going to go. And like beyond that, I mean, it's no one knows. And Eric is super plugged in, and he doesn't have it. He's not sure, and that's what is interesting about this particular draft is how unpredictable it is, and all that. I thought it was interesting that he brought up Myles Murphy, a guy that he mocked to the Packers, but he's a guy that we've talked about quite a bit as a fit for the Packers, which probably should take him off their board because we've talked about him a lot. But I mean, it's Eric talked about a lot of the same stuff that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks with who we think is going to be available, what we think they might do, and all that. I thought it was interesting that the Dalton Kincaid question that I asked him was actually before Daniel Jeremiah's mock came out. And lo and behold, that's who Daniel Jeremiah has him taking at pick 13 is Dalton Kincaid. And that's something that would be, you heard Eric talk about it. If he stays healthy, he thinks he's going to be a really good player. I agree with that. I think he has superstar potential if he stays healthy and lands in the right role. And I think Green Bay would be that role for him. And I brought up the fact that he's going to play a similar role that Jackson Smith and Jigba would play in this offense. Like he is going to be your middle of the field weapon, your guy that is going to be a vacuum in the middle of the field, quarterback's really good friend, someone that's going to be open often in that short to intermediate range in the middle of the field, just like Smith and Jigba. So I think that's what you would pivot to as a Packers fan if they did take Kincaid and you were really caping for them to take Smith and Jigba. But, the other thing too is talk about insulating your young quarterback with talent. That very well could be a tackle as well. So it's.
Tell them what you said. Tell them what you said in the group chat. Tell the people.
I forgot what I said in the group chat. I say a lot of things in the group chat.
Well, one, you said there's no value in picking a tackle. This is when they said the 15th pick. And then you said just pick 3 guys on day 3 because they're elite at developing guys on day 3, which I proved today is not true.
Did I say
this
that?
This regime has developed day 3 players. Day 3. So Elton Jenkins doesn't count. And that's it. John Runyon, Yosh Nijman. That's it. Zach Tom, maybe. Zach Tom is a most likely, but a maybe. You know what I mean? Because it's only 1 year. But otherwise, it's been Cole Madison, Royce Newman. That's right. It. Like, it's back of the roster. Yeah. The point I'm making is when people say, like, oh, they're great at developing day 3 offensive line talent, they're referring to David Bakhtiari, Josh Sitton, TJ Lang, Corey Linsley, all of which were drafted by Ted Thompson and coached by James Campen. None of those guys are here anymore. RIP. So the only point I'm making off of that is,
but Yosh is a notch in their belt. Zach Tom is a notch. I think they're still pretty good at it.
They count and they're good, but it's not to this level like everyone does. And I've said this before. Say what you mean. I'm not talking to just you when I say this. Say what you mean. You don't want them to pick an offensive tackle early because you want something with more sex appeal. That's fine.
Yes.
But don't tell me they can just find an offensive tackle later because there's a massive difference between
who
viable starter and potential all-pro.
No. Who is one of my pants-off draft picks?
Paris Johnson.
Yeah.
So
take him.
Because you're smart. You're not.
But other than that, that's what I mean is like.
Let me ask you this: one of your pants-off draft picks. Who would you take? Paris Johnson or Jackson Smith and Jigba? You have to pick one at 13.
I just think Paris Johnson might go 3. So
that's not what I'm asking. He fell to 13. There's a gas mask photo that surfaced 10 minutes before the draft started.
I would take Paris.
Thank you. That's all I'm saying. And here's the thing: when we do our board later, I get labeled as like anti Jackson Smith and Jigba as the Packers pick, just because I've pointed out that's not the only fucking player they can take that's any good. Like, there are more guys. Trust me, there are more guys. And Smith and Jigba is a good player. He's a really good prospect. He is not Randy Moss in his prime. Like, he's going to be really good, I think, in the NFL. But like, there are other players they can pick. And this Packers team just isn't competing for a championship. So pick the best players. Who are those? Paris Johnson. To me, if I did a big board right now in front of you, and I don't have one, Paris Johnson would be like the third player on the list.
He should be.
That's even
he's finally getting the love that he should have gotten this whole draft process.
And that's including like taking out, because like Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, all those guys aren't going to be on my board necessarily, because like the Packers have thrown their nuts on the table for Jordan Love. You can't pick a quarterback after you've done that. Like, I'm sorry, you just can't. I don't care. The only way you could is if it was like,
but that's also why I think a lot of fans think they absolutely positively need to take a pass catcher at 13, because
I don't agree
right now, as it stands this season, right now, for Jordan Love to be successful, they've got the tackles in place. Moving in the future, like, I would totally get that, but as of right now, they have way more of a need at pass catcher than they do at tackle.
I agree with that part, but to say they have to pick one, like, for example,
and Jackson Smith and Jigba is like the only receiver in this draft class that I think could come in and be like a 1,000-yard receiver right away.
I agree with that as well. I don't know. I don't really care about right away necessarily, but I do agree with that. But what I would say is this: it's the same thing I said about last year. Morley, you talk about this all the time. Invest in offense, right? So last year, their 2 first-round picks were on defense. Yes. Second, third, fourth. All 4 of those players were offensive players. So 4 of their 5 picks, or 4 of their 6 picks that mattered, went to offense. You can invest in offense and not pick that player in the first round. So all I'm saying that to say is, if they take Lucas Van Ness tomorrow night, they can still take Jalen Hyatt at 42 and Luke Musgrave at 45 and Sam Laporta at 78. And I am just tossing names for the hell of it. And then you say, you know what? That's a really good draft they had. They got one really good pass rusher that they can have. They got a speed receiver, and they got 2 tight ends that are going to be pass catchers for them. Like, they can do that. The only thing, and I do this every year, it's not just Smith and Jigba. I just don't want, if you go into the draft hoping for one player and say this team has to pick one player, you're more likely to be disappointed, because there's 12 players that are going to be picked before the Packers are on the clock. And as you guys can kind of tell from my view of this team and this roster, there aren't a lot of players I'm willing to trade up for. I think the Packers need capital. I think they need players. I think they need cheap labor. Like, they're trying to reset their salary cap situation and get younger, quite frankly, because some of this roster is aging a little bit. It's not like the 98 Bulls where the entire roster is like 100 years old. Like, most of their older guys, but still older guys, David Bakhtiari, Preston Smith, like, those are 2 pretty important players at some pretty important positions. So that's the point I'm getting at with all of that stuff. But there was a lot that he had in there. Miles Murphy is one of my favorite players in this draft class. My philosophy in general, again, and I wrote this, I will give you guys the link here in the comments here in just a few minutes, but I write down who's an A player, who's a B player, who's a C player. To me, take an A player. What does that mean? Take a guy who I think is really good at that. And I don't really care as much about position when I come to talk about some of that stuff. So I think the Packers need help in a lot of places. Yes, receiver and tight end are 2 of those places. And I think they're going to take, Paul Bretto had a bold prediction that they're going to take 4 receivers and tight ends. I agree with him. It could even be 5, because I think they could take 2 receivers. I was going to
say, yeah, it might be more.
2 receivers and 3 tight ends. They have 11 picks. They always take like a flyer on a late round guy, competition for guys like Samori Toure and stuff like that. And I think that 2 or 3 tight ends, I think, is a virtual lock for this draft class. So I would take Jackson Smith and Jigba at 13. He is not the number 1 player on my board that I have for tomorrow night. And I think that a lot of the discourse when it comes to first round receivers and the drought in Green Bay is mostly stupid. Like I said, I'm looking at a picture right now of the Sports Illustrated cover when Rodgers had all those guys on there. Not a first round pick in the bunch. The problem the Packers have had is they have stopped investing in the position. But when they invested in those positions, it was still in the 2nd or 3rd round. And they're really good at that. So like, my general rule of thumb is still and always will be, if the Packers take a receiver, like this was kind of my Christian Watson thing last year, right? They took Watson at 34 and my pre-draft was kind of like, whatever. And then I was like, but Green Bay took him in the second round. The rule is he's good. It's just kind of like when they take a 4th round offensive lineman. General rule is he's probably at least passable. Let's go to our next guest from Locked On Packers and The Leap.
Wait a second. Peter, I'm glad you're here because Jacob just yelled at me for saying Jackson Smith and Jigba should be the pick at 13.
Oh, that is not what I said.
He just scolded Packers fans across the nation that are tuning in to this episode about how Jackson Smith and Jigba, that would be just, how dare we? How dare we want a pass catcher for a young
Well,
person?
I gotta go.
Peter, get him.
I can't be here. I can't be here with this heretic. This is nonsense.
Okay, that's a lie. First of all, speaking of heretics, lying, that's what, the 9th commandment, Morley, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor.
I don't know.
So shame on you.
You
don't know.
Number 9, Christian Watson, wide receiver.
Nailed
there
it.
We go.
Nailed it.
There we go. Welcome to the show, Peter of Locked On Packers, Locked On Today Sports, The Leap, which is a newsletter that you could subscribe to. And I do. I am a paying subscriber. So I read Jason Hirschhorn and Peter Bukowski on a daily basis. Peter also formerly of Sports Illustrated, FanRag, the internet, basically kind of in general. And
very much.
A rather large cult hero in New York Jets fandom. So the first thing I want to start with, Peter, is I don't want you to narrow it down to one specific tweet or anything, but like what's the, because that would be hard to do, right? But what is the general theme of your favorite part of Copium of, they're getting a 4th rounder and a 6th rounder for Rodgers and you're going to like it. And then they find out it was actually a 2 and a 1.
I think it is everyone going back to something that I said in December of 2022 about Matthew Stafford trade. And I said that I think the Packers would get more in a trade for Matthew Stafford, for Aaron Rodgers than Matthew Stafford. And I was obviously wrong about that, but I remember us in our group chat talking about that. Like it seemed obvious to us that Aaron Rodgers should be worth more than that. Now that was before, the season ended the way that it did again. That was before, he was weird about retiring again, which apparently he was really close to doing. So like, I think we all assumed that he was going to play at least 2 more years. And if that was true and everyone knew he was going to do that, then I think he probably would have been worth whatever that. So it became, look at all of these things that like aren't really relevant to what was actually happening in the Aaron Rodgers trade. That's the stuff that is always funny to me. Cause it's like, I was saying the same thing for the last 6 weeks, that this was going to be that they were going to get a first, probably with conditions, but reasonable conditions. And I didn't even think 13 and 15, and they got more than what I said. And Jets fans are still like, yeah, but that one thing you said that one time about the one, it's just like, oh my God. Okay. Whatever you say at Staten Island rules 6'9" boots. I don't know.
I will say this: Jets fans are Mets fans, and
Knicks fans. It is a brutal existence. I feel so sorry. I know I live in the tri-state area. I know these people. They are many of them are my friends. I got a lot of texts from my friends. I got a text from a friend today in sports media who's a Jets fan. He said, "Thank God this happened. I can read your Twitter timeline again."
I didn't know Jets fans. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know they were there.
I just realized I thought Peter's friends with Mike Greenberg. So good for you on that.
Well,
the only Jets fan I'm familiar with.
I thought the Jets had the fireman guy, and like that was it. And
any
got
Packer
the people
fans
going, but other than that,
yeah. So that's interesting. It's funny. The whole saga has been hilarious. Just going, because even last week, like I had tweeted something like, I'm going off of Charles Robinson and Albert Breer saying it's a 2 and a conditional 1. And I'm like, okay, so that's just what I'm basing this mock draft off of. And I was like, you're not getting anywhere near that. It's going to be like a 5 and a conditional 3rd the next year. I'm like,
well, no, don't you remember that if this is going past the draft, the Packers are actually going to have to give a 1st and a 2nd to the Jets just to dump the contract. Don't you remember?
Oh my God. That was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Okay. That's enough of the dunking on, because we could do this for the next 45 minutes.
We sure could.
I do have one question because you said Knicks fans too. So my understanding in New York, and I don't
Are they winning right now? I haven't looked at the score.
I believe they were, but I don't know if they are. My understanding though in the area is it's Jets,
Yeah, they're gonna
Nets,
win. Wow.
Nets, and that it's Yankees, Knicks.
No, there are no
Giants.
such thing as a Nets fan.
Okay. That's okay.
It's
That's
Yankees, Giants, Knicks, and then Mets, Jets, Knicks. And then
Got
the Nets fans are like they live in somewhere else. They're not New York sports fans anyway.
People that were like, oh, I was a fan of Kevin Durant when he was in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
So.
Or they're like they live in Brooklyn and they don't really care about sports, but like Barclays is a cool arena.
Got it. Okay.
And Barclays is a cool arena and the food is really good.
Okay. That's good to know if I'm ever, well, I will be in the area, not in Brooklyn, but I will be in the area in August. So that might be something well, they're not playing basketball there in August, I guess, but I'll have to come by during basketball season.
Should we go to training camp? Should we go to Jets camp?
I think so. The plan is I will be there Friday, August 5th. I'm going to Yankee Stadium Friday, Sunday, and then Saturday.
Camp will be open.
To Jets camp. Yeah, I would assume so. So it's possible. So if that's something, we'll talk offline. But yeah, that's the plan for now. Let's get into this though. The draft is tomorrow, April 27th. The Packers have 3 picks in the top 50. What I want to start with is Daniel Jeremiah's last mock just dropped. He has them taking Dalton Kincaid at 13 overall. Yeah. He has had last year, he had them taking Quay Walker at 28. Previous years, he had mentioned that like he didn't say that he didn't mock Jordan Love to there, but he said this could be a spot for Jordan Love. So that I'm giving him like
he's had good Green Bay info.
He had Jair Alexander in 2018 as well. So very good Green Bay info on that. So you have been for 3 weeks on Locked On Packers talking about this concept of Green Bay wants a tight end. And they want, I mean, if you look at, I think the only early one that they didn't have a visit with of the big 5, if you will, is Luke Musgrave. I think they visited with the other Darnell Washington, Kincaid, Mayer, and Sam Laporta. So they visited with the other 4. Musgrave, I would imagine, is a guy that fits. I mean, in this draft and with the current state of the room, every tight end is a Packers type, like all of them, because they need a million types of bodies.
Before you get too far off of this, that just sparked something in my mind of the way they've done stuff with visits in the past.
I had the same get out of my head, Morley, because as soon as you were saying that, I went, oh my God, Luke Musgrave is the tight end.
Yeah, because it's almost like they're doing a checklist of like, we love Luke Musgrave. Are we making a mistake by not taking one of these other guys? Let's do our due diligence because we know we like Musgrave.
On the other hand, though,
did that with Rashawn.
On the other hand,
exactly,
you would need the medicals, right?
Yeah,
because he's someone who's had injuries, and so you'd want to. They get the medical rechecks and the stuff at the combine, but I feel like you'd want to have him in to talk to. I mean, they have some of the best medical staff, orthopedic people in the world.
Unless they felt good at the combine, because his was like what, a foot or something like that. I mean, it's not like you're talking about a back with Kincaid.
He just had a season-ending injury not that long ago, right?
Yep.
Was it a foot
That's what
injury?
I'm talking about, though. I think it, not all injuries are created equally, though, either. Like with Kincaid, you want to get your hands on him. Be like, okay, it was a back. You good? Because backs are tricky. So I don't know.
They did bring in, so Laporta, there's whispers about him with medicals. There's whispers about Darnell Washington with medicals. And there's whispers about, well, not whispers, that's a full-blown report, Kincaid with medicals. Michael Mayer, I don't think there's anything from a health standpoint with him. I mean, granted, most of these guys are 22 years old.
He is one of the cleanest prospects in the draft, period. Like he's not one of like the 5 best players, but he might just be the flat out cleanest player in the class. Like there's just not really anything to ding him on because he's good at everything.
So let's go into that then. So Kincaid, Mayer, with those guys, you're as into historical perspectives and past things like determining future things. The catch-all term of analytics, the boogeyman. Just throwing all that in together. And most of those things say, don't take a tight end.
They do.
But you've kind of softened your stance on that over the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. Why?
So part of it is because I think one of the reasons why we've been so bad at drafting tight ends in the first round in particular is just bad luck in a lot of ways. Because if you go back and you look at the early parts of the 2000s, there have been 25 tight ends taken in the first round since 2000. the first 13 of them, more than half of them are good. We're talking about multi-time Pro Bowl players, guys like Jeremy Shockey, Todd Heap, Bubba Franks. It's the second half of the last 25 years that suck. That's where we've been really bad. And I think part of it is because if you look at the types of players that are being drafted, they're not the number one, the complete players, or number two, they're not high-end pass catchers. Brandon Pettigrew, the idea was, well, he can be a premier run blocker now, but he's probably never going to be that premier pass catcher.
How many of
Jermaine
these guys
Gresham,
involve the Lions? Pettigrew, Hawkinson,
a lot of
Ebron.
them.
Oh, Jesus. That's why. This is why. Every bad thing about first round tight ends is because it's Detroit.
And so it's also a really small sample size. We're talking about 25 players in 25 years. There have been 27 receivers taken in the first round since 2016. Like over the same time, we're talking about 5x the number of receivers that have taken. I just think we can trust the data so much more at other positions than we can with tight ends. Now, I had Kevin Cole on my show yesterday, and he did a really interesting study that basically found there's two main components that drive tight end success based on your collegiate production. It is 40-time 10-yard split and yards after catch per reception. And depending on where you look, like Michael Mayer is really good yards after catch, but that his 10-yard split was initially reported as not great. And then it turned out it was better. So he's actually he's in the range where you're comfortable with him. But like Sam Laporta checks out as like the best tight end in the class as a result. And so you look at Luke Musgrave, explosive linear athlete. Darnell Washington, in terms of yards after catch, broken tackles after catch, he leads the tight end class. So from a lot of the things, the predictive measures, it made me I love Sam Laporta. So like, it didn't make me rethink Sam Laporta, but actually after talking to Kevin, I was like, maybe I'm lower on Musgraves and Washington than I should be. And I felt, like I said, I felt really good about Sam Laporta. And then Dalton Kincaid, we just don't have testing on. Now, Dane Brugler said on his show, he thought Kincaid would have run in the 4.5s, like between 4.53 and 4.58. And if you're 245 running 4.5, even 4.58, that's premier athleticism at the tight end position. And I think the thing that is weird to me about tight ends is they can be worth that pick, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're going to use the 13th pick on a tight end and he becomes Mark Andrews, 100%, that's worth the pick. I think the question is, where is that sweet spot? Like, you guys answer this for me, because I've been trying to answer this myself. The Packers take a tight end at 13. Give me the worst player of the last couple years that tight end could turn into where you'd go, it was worth it.
Last couple, because I mean, I know the comparison that like Ben Fennell made not that long ago was like, if he's Heath Miller, is that worth that pick? If he's as a Y tight end type, or Todd Heap, that's another Y tight end type, players that kind of became
Michael Mayer is Todd Heap to me. And I think if like Todd Heap made 3 Pro Bowls and they were all, and I think it was 3 Pro Bowls in the first 5 seasons, and they were really good. I think he was on that Super Bowl team.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So like, if Michael Mayer turns into Todd Heap and helps you win a Super Bowl, I think that works, right? My thing is like, okay, if he's TJ Hawkinson, what TJ Hawkinson is now, that's worth it probably, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
Like especially he was really good for Minnesota last year.
And he's coming into, I thought it was weird that Detroit traded him, because he's coming into that point where you really see tight ends start to develop and come into their own. And it's almost like Detroit was about ready to kind of reap some of that fruit, and they traded him. And now Minnesota is getting that. And he was really good in Minnesota. And maybe that's just because it's Detroit. But your point about receiver or tight ends being worth it, if you get a top 3 tight end, I would rather have a top 3 tight end versus a top 3 wide receiver. I think it's a bigger mismatch issue. I'd rather
have a top 3 tight end than like the 12th best receiver. I think that's fair. I'd rather have Devontae Adams than probably anyone not named Travis Kelce. But would you rather have? I'd rather have Travis Kelce. I'd rather have Mark Andrews than T. Higgins.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
so
kind of
when I
it's
say
kind of
top-
like in the fantasy football stuff when you're like taking, oh, I got it. Like the highest scorer every year is Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts or whoever. But the difference between the
There's
first
14 guys that are in that
right
that
and the
band
tight
of
end,
players.
it's really Kittle, Kelsey, like
Yeah.
Andrews, and that's maybe
and
sometimes
that's
Darren
the
Waller
point I'm
but-
trying to make is like if you can find someone like Kelsey, which good luck, but Kelsey is to me the biggest issue in the NFL. How do you
I agree.
How do you deal with that guy? And so if you say, hey, Dalton Kincaid is going to have a Travis Kelsey career, that's how good he's going to be. He's the first pick in this draft.
Yeah.
If not, I mean, unless you
Well,
are just gung ho on taking a quarterback.
He's the first non-quarterback. Yeah.
Even then, I might take him over him and be like, I'll find my quarterback next year. You know,
I mean,
I don't know.
I think you can make that case. That is one of the reasons too why I've softened on this, because if they hit, that's the thing. It's like I think about this like contracts too, because there's been this whole discussion about a surplus value of contracts, right? If you give a guy a contract, can he live up to that contract? Dorf, your son Rashawn Gary.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like that pick at 12. You did not love that pick at 12 in terms of the player and the fit and all that stuff. But what I said was he can live up to being the 12th overall pick in this draft. He has the talent to do that. And I said the same thing about Jordan Love. Jordan Love all day was the 26th best player in that draft, worth the 26th pick as a quarterback. That upside was there. He could live up to that billing. You have to take a player that you think can be an elite kind of tight end. And I think if you think that guy is going to do that, you can justify it because, as Morley is saying, if you get Mark Andrews, even Dallas Goedert, those guys are so valuable. And one of the things I talked about with Kevin Cole was you go back and you look at the value that Rob Gronkowski brought to the Patriots. It wasn't just that he was huge and scored a lot of touchdowns and caught a lot of passes. He was incredibly valuable to them in the run game. Like that has real like wins above replacement. I know like nerds, they get billed as like they only care about passing and yards and touchdowns. It's like, no, the nerds value the blocking too, because that has real value to your team. And I think for a team like the Packers, it's why Michael Mayer to me just makes so much sense. And I also think he can be a mismatch player. Like I think he could be Dallas Goedert. I think he could be in his top, whatever percentile of outcomes in the same way Christian Watson. The reason you trade up for Christian Watson is because in his realm of potential outcomes is AJ Green. Like his top 1% of outcomes, he's AJ Green. And guess who he looked like for like 6 games last year?
Right.
Like he looked like proto AJ Green. And so that I think is what you have to think about. Like what are the tail outcomes here? And I think that makes you go, okay, Bijan Robinson, maybe the 3rd best player in the draft by some people, but you can't take him at 13 because even if he's the best running back in the league, he's not that much better, to the point that you made earlier, than the 13th running back in the league. He's just not. So like, I think tight end, it's the same as fantasy football. You can get so much value by having a good tight end, because if you're a tight end, if you go into every game knowing my tight end is going to outplay your tight end, and that's such a value. Like Morley knows that from watching the Chiefs so much. Like there is just no team that they're going to go against where you think you're going to get your tight end is going to get outplayed by Travis Kelsey is going to get outplayed by that guy. And I don't know how many times has it happened ever. Probably not.
I mean, we had the Kittle Kelsey Bowl, right? And Kelsey outplayed.
And the last thing I'll say, and then we can move on if you want. Look at the last 4 teams: Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, Dallas Goedert. No, you get a little, wonky at the end, and it was kind of true. In other, I think it was 2018. 5 of the top 10 value producers, according to Sports Info and Solutions, of pass catchers were tight ends. It was like Kittle, Kelsey, Waller, Andrews, and Goddard. Like those guys are so valuable. Who did the Chiefs play in the AFC Championship game? Why am I blanking?
Cincinnati. Hayden Hurst was a player that helped them too.
But former first round pick and someone that they gave a real contract to.
Yes.
Because
it's pretty good. I mean, he's
helpful. Like,
player.
I mean, he doesn't get the target share because it's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but that's still a useful and helpful player for them. And something else, another point that you might have made throughout that whole thing, but so Jackson Smith-Njigba is the best receiver in this class. Like, there's no question about that. I don't think you're going to find many, if any, really, that disagree with that assessment. But then when you start tossing these tight ends in here, so for everybody saying, because I keep telling everybody, everyone's like, oh, well, Green Bay pick a receiver in the first round. And I'm just like, well, if Smith-Njigba's there, then sure, they could. If he's not there, then what, you want them to pick one just to say that they picked one? Like, I don't understand that.
I think the answer for some people is literally yes, though.
Yeah. Which is a weird answer to me, but that's fine. I completely understand. People like players who score touchdowns and are going to be able to play with them. Like, I can't play with Paris Johnson on Madden. I understand that. So I get why that's not kind of one of those things. But my thinking is that you've talked about, is Dalton Kincaid, is Michael Mayer the second best receiver in this draft class? And I do think the answer, because like I have both of those guys rated much higher.
I think the answer is yes.
Receiver, yeah, whoever that's.
I think the answer is yes, especially if JSN is off the board. I think you can make the case that those are the next two best pass catchers. And I think if Dalton Kincaid had tested, if he ran, let's say he ran 4.53 and didn't have this back issue at 245 and jumped 38, I would have said he's the best pass catcher in the draft. And I don't know that anyone is higher on JSN than I am, but I'm just like, I'm that high on Dalton Kincaid. He's my favorite tight end that I have watched. And Kyle Pitts plays receiver. I don't care what you say. That I have watched in a long time. And I think he's special. He reminds me of Travis Kelce in some of the movement skills. Some of like one of the things that Travis Kelce does that just sort of blows me away is his ability to make catches and in one motion catch it and get upfield. And the feel of knowing where that defender is, his feel in zone coverage is the best I've ever seen. He finds holes in zone coverage without having to even see defenders. Like his situational awareness and his spatial awareness is unbelievable. And I think Kincaid has a lot of those same traits to just make himself friendly to the quarterback. I have not spent enough time, I don't think, talking about him. I'm going to be surprised if Dalton Kincaid is the pick. I don't think he's going to be the pick, but I do believe he is in the group of players that the Packers would like to pick or would be okay with picking. I just don't think he's necessarily their first choice. It may be what ends up happening. Like maybe they trade down and Mayer gets sniped and they have to draft Kincaid. I think they'd be fine with that, but I don't think it's necessarily their preference.
And you are the second guest we've had on here tonight that said almost verbatim that if Kincaid stays healthy and works out, he's not a stretch at 13. Like Eric Edholm was just on here saying that.
Caveat for me is the only thing I worry about, just because I'm old. I think I'm the oldest one
if
here.
You worked out and if you didn't have the back issue.
I've never met anybody who used to have back problems. That's the only thing that has me like, I'll be happy. Cleared. Like if they pick him.
I used to have back problems. No. And I went to see, and I started going to chiropractor and it changed my life. Swear to God.
Interesting.
I do know people that I've got. And the thing is, it's not like he, broke his back. I mean, he technically broke his back, but it was something he played through, and it was something that was kind of just a smaller thing. But whenever you hear back injury, I get it. It's a scary thing. But if teams are okay with it, and he was cleared at the combine, and I think that's why Green Bay brought him in too, just so like, hey, it's a back. We want to see it. We want to get our hands on you. But you're the second person to say all that stuff, and you're the second person to say he reminds you of Travis Kelce. And if you get 80% of Travis Kelce, that is a home run pick.
It's a really good player.
Yeah. And the last thing I will say about the tight end position, I think, Jacob, you actually, you put this out there, but the two scenarios that if we're just going all pass catcher, all 24/7, right? Would you rather have JSN?
The Score 100 agenda.
Yeah, I mean, it's alive and well, but would you rather have JSN at 13, or would you rather be able to move back, take Mayer at?
Oh yeah, I did do this.
21.
The answer was overwhelmingly Jackson Smith-Njigba, by the way.
Was it? That's interesting.
I think the answer was because I put Charbonnet as the fourth guy. What I should have done was put like Keon White in one of them instead of Felix AU from Kansas State.
I think the way you have to phrase it is just cut everything out, just first round. Would you rather have JSN or would you rather trade back and move up? And so your final options would be, would you rather have JSN or would you rather have Michael Mayer and Jalen Hyatt?
Yeah, that's
And
not a bad way to put that.
Either of those scenarios, I'm walking away from day one.
My answer is yes. My answer is yes.
I would be okay with either.
I'm cool with either of those. And I just saw Dusty Evely say this on Twitter that even if JSN is there, he thinks Michael Mayer makes more sense just from a fit, from a need, from a value. And he's like, take Michael Mayer at 13 and take Rashee Rice in the 3rd round and be fine. And like,
but
I don't know if that's a bad idea. I don't.
Do you have to move Rice, up? So here's my hang up with that.
I'd rather move down. I'd rather move down and still take him.
Why did they? So if the rumors are true that Green Bay, the offer was on the table, do you want 4th round pick or do you want to swap 13 and 15? Why would you move up 2 spots to take a tight end that seemingly would be there? Like, I think because
they want JSN is the answer.
I think so too. Or
one of those. Like, okay, so that's my next question. I know, Peter, you got to go, and you've been with us longer than we said you would be, so I appreciate that. So you talked about this concept of trading back with some team in the 20s. I think you mentioned the Chargers specifically on a show recently, but trading back, grabbing Mayer, and then trading back up to get Jalen Hyatt. Obviously, there's somebody, though, like that's not Green Bay's plan, like we're doing this no matter what kind of thing. Who are the guys you think that are likely to be available? Because you can't say Paris Johnson anymore, quite frankly. I think it pretty is set in stone.
As Austin Powers would say, that train has sailed.
Yes. Yes. So who are the guys where it's like, these guys are available, we push the button, we move forward, we picked this guy at 13, we move on. And like, okay, these guys aren't available, so we trade back. I'm kind of asking you to make a verbal flow chart of sorts. So who's the push the button guys before they trade back? And then do you have an official prediction coming on tomorrow's Locked On Packers show?
There's 3 push the button players for me. If we're taking Paris Johnson off the board, and apparently we're taking Paris Johnson off the board, it's JSN and it's Miles Murphy. Those are the 2 guys. Those are guys that
Paris Johnson was the 3rd.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if those guys are there, you take them and you are happy about it. I think the Packers would be very happy about it. I think that their connections to someone like Lucas Van Ness has been a little bit overblown. I don't think they like him as much as the mock drafts liked him. But I do think they like Miles Murphy a lot. And it's interesting. I was just talking to someone about this, that if you go back to like February, March, Miles Murphy was consistently going in like the top 10. And then he didn't work out at the combine, but then did work out at his pro day and killed his pro day and is now going in the late 20s. And I'm just sort of like, why exactly?
Sure.
And so I think that the consensus board, by the way, says this, the one that Arif Hassan put together, Pro Football Network, has Miles Murphy, I believe, at 14. So right in that 13 to 15 range. I think he's your Preston Smith replacement, and he's your Rashawn Gary insurance. And I think he's a really good prospect. He's someone that the 3 of us sort of pined over early in the process, as I recall. And so he is someone that I think makes a lot of sense. I love FAU. I love King Felix. I don't think the Packers would take him at 13, but those are the 3 guys at 13 that I think they are going to pick. So I think it's going to be one. I'm going to cop out here. Sorry. It's going to be one of those 3 guys, or they trade back and take Michael Mayer. If I had to guess, JSN or Michael Mayer is going to be a Green Bay Packer come Thursday night.
Okay, there you have it. He's Peter Bukowski. You can follow him on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski. Listen to Locked On Packers tomorrow. You're going live after the draft tomorrow night, just in case the Packers pick twice, which that would be a hell of a shakeup too. But it'll be interesting to see. Peter, appreciate having you. Look forward to listening tomorrow, Friday, and then, of course, Monday morning when this is all over. Enjoy being Aaron Rodgers' largest aggressor and what I imagine are a boatload of like foot picks from Jets fans.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you wishing. You're pretty sure he appreciates me wishing that upon him. He's Peter Bukowski. Thanks for coming in. We're an hour in. I appreciate Peter for stopping by. I appreciate Morley for stopping by. So, Morley, I'm going to ask you the same question. Then we're going to do the yearly tradition of the draft, which, again, I would like to remind everybody, I beat the living piss out of Morley last year in that. I nailed 3 picks. My 3 picks were Sean Ryan, Romeo Dobbs, and Zach Tom. I got all three of those. Morley had a bagel, 0, absolutely nothing, that's incredibly pathetic. Like, are you embarrassed? Is your wife embarrassed to be
No,
married to
it's
you?
not embarrassing because listen, I'm gonna defend myself and give you a compliment in the same breath. Getting 3 is really good. Like, we've been doing this, and I'm right in the middle of the Chiefs draft right now as well. We've been doing this for like 7 years, and we've only one time ever had one person get more than 1. And so the fact that you just rolled out 3, I don't think you appreciate how great that is. That's really good. And you're welcome for giving you some of those players as well. I'm going to take credit. You stole all my guys.
I did.
That's all that happened. It was collusion.
That's certainly possible. Collusion. I love that. The Rodney Ruxin reference. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry. I'm trying to
I also gave myself the first pick because you won last year. I hope that's okay.
I was going to give you the first pick as Schadenfreude, so there's that too.
Are we going? We only have 2 this year, so are we going snake or are we just going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2?
We'll go 1, 2. We should,
because then I would rather snake with 2 people is weird.
Snake with 2 people is weird. So yeah, we could go 1, 2, 1, 2. That's fine. I don't think there's any great advantage to being able to pick 2 guys in a row. So there's that. But before we get to that, and we will get to that, I do want to talk about, so we have talked about, I mean, obviously your primary scenario is going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba. We know that. That's been talked about. My primary scenario is kind of just take the best player available. Maybe that's JSN. Maybe that's somebody else. But there are guys, obviously, that you would just say, hey, here are the guy, run the card, push the button, whatever way you want to put it. So give me, maybe there's more than 4 guys. And let's remove Jackson Smith and Jigba from conversation because we've talked about him enough. Who are the 4 guys, if you will, on your list that you're just like, they're there, push the button, and let's go to tomorrow night?
And we're talking just at 13?
At 13, yep. Before we talk about trading back, anything like, well, okay. Let me ask this.
Trading back would be one of my push the buttons, but Paris, I just think, Paris Johnson, I don't think he's going to be there, man. Like, I think that ship sailed, or whatever Peter said that Austin Powers said. But the train has left the sky. Okay, so 4 guys I got to think of. My number 1 then is Nolan Smith. Love him. Love Nolan Smith. Don't think he's going to be a Packers just because of reasons, and they're mostly related to the fact that Quay Walker is bigger than him. Still love him. Think he's a great player. This one's going to be off the wall and wacky a little bit. I don't think he'll be there, but if he is, and if Devon Weatherspoon is sitting there at pick 13, I run the card in. I don't care that he's at a position that people might say they don't need. Don't care. Think he's awesome. Love his game. Him and Jair would literally make opposing wide receivers cry on a weekly basis. So he would be my second guy if JSN's off the board. And I'm having to look at like my big board here. Who else do I really like? I mean, man, it's tough. It's tough to think of like because Paris, like I still want to say Paris. Can I still say Paris?
Sure. I mean, yeah, like that's certainly one of your push the button. So here's mine. While you think here, my push the button picks are Paris Johnson, Miles Murphy, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. If any of the, and listen, I said the receiver. So for everybody shouting,
I'm just counting.
I said the receiver. So those are my push the button picks. If they're not there, that is when you execute or try to execute. And granted, maybe there's not an opportunity to do that. Whenever somebody says like, oh, they should have traded back to do this or whatever. It's like, well, sure. But what if nobody wanted to do that? Or like, hey, we're the Chargers. We'll move up to 13, but we're only going to give you 20 and a 6th round pick. Then it's like, okay, well, we'll just stay here and take whoever it is. But those guys that I mentioned, Paris Johnson, Miles Murphy, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, and then Devon Weatherspoon is the one like wild card type player. I've been on him from the jump. Love that guy. If they're not there, I would trade back. And that's where I think you start talking about Dalton Kincaid. You start talking about Michael Mayer. I would take Mayer over Kincaid. That is me. From what we've gathered, from what Peter said, from what we've heard quietly in our own Trust Me Bro sources as well, is that they prefer Mayer to Kincaid. So I'll be interested to see if that is in fact the case. Maybe it's not. We'll see. Those are my guys. If not, I'm looking at a trade back. So there's that. Morley, I want to go on record here so we can do this before we do the draft. But what is your official prediction for tomorrow night?
Dude, I have no idea. Got
to go on record with something. There's no penalty if you're wrong.
I think my heart tells me that JSN will be there at 13 and they will take him. It just adds up to me why they moved up to 13 and why they wanted to move up. I think it's for a pass catcher. They've been in on pass catchers this entire time. I don't think there's a tight end that's worth taking at 13, but I think JSN is. So that is just going to be my official prediction. Is I think JSN will be the pick at 13. If they want to get squirrely, they might even still move up to 10 for him. I don't think that's off the table. But the Packers have literally surprised me the last 4 years. I will also throw that in.
Ever since what?
Jordan Love.
Gary. Oh, Rashawn Gary.
Gary. I mean, yeah, Gary. And then Savage. That was weird too.
Gary was surprising. And then we figured out afterwards it shouldn't have been. Savage was one of those. They clearly really loved him and knew they wouldn't get him because they traded in front of Baltimore and basically told you that was going to happen. So that's your official as JSN. I will say this. I do think I got a lot of beef with the first round receiver discourse, mostly because it's based in fan fiction. But the biggest thing is, who's a receiver that they could have taken the last couple of years that they've passed on? T. Higgins, right. Sure, maybe. But like T. Higgins got passed on by 32 other teams too. So like, I'm not saying that he's not a great player. He obviously is, but that's just kind of what I'm talking about with that. I think they would take a receiver. They tried to trade up for Justin Jefferson. They tried to trade up for Brandon Ayuk. Neither one of those things worked. They wanted Rashad Bateman. They didn't get Bateman. And last year they would have drafted Chris Olave, but they didn't want to give up. I think the Saints gave up like 3 top 100 picks to go get him or something like that. So they didn't want to do that.
And they wanted to move up into round 1 for Watson.
And
which they
correct,
did
which
in the second round, but
I'm even more pissed about that now simply because it just would have ended the stupidity. Like Green Bay took Watson at 32 instead of 34. And we just wouldn't have to talk about this anymore. And I know like there's going to be the one thing that I'm going to be annoyed, I'm already preemptively annoyed by it, is the discourse of this thing right here. Oh, they never took a first round receiver for Aaron Rodgers. Now they do it for Jordan Love. Like, who gives a shit? Like, honestly, the Patriots took one receiver in the first round and never mind. I don't want to go through this discourse. That's just not how this is going to work. That's not how the night's going to go. It's going to be a happy night. It's going to be a happy day. My official prediction is going to be the same one I gave on the Underage Packers podcast a couple days ago, which unfortunately we recorded before the Aaron Rodgers trade, but we kind of spoke in the terms that they would have gotten these picks anyways. But my official prediction, I think somebody takes Jackson Smith and Jigba before we get to 13, whoever that is. I don't know. I don't have a team in name for you, but I think they trade down and I think they take Michael Mayer. And I'm okay with that. I think Michael Mayer is a top 20 player in this class. So, and for the Packers specifically. So again, when I do that, I'm taking out like the quarterbacks to me, if I rank the top 100 would be ranked like 96, 97, 98, 99, and 100 or something like that, just because I don't.
Here's the question then. So you, myself, and Peter, it sounds like, all think that Miles Murphy is very high on their board. Yeah. But none of us have mentioned him as the pick. And he's probably the most likely person to be there at 13. So do we really think that he's a high on their board, or do we really just think they want a pass catcher?
I think both things are true. Gutekunst did say in his media availability on Monday that need does bleed into it. And I do think that, and this is part of the discussion I've had with people is, no, they don't need an offensive tackle this year. And of course, need should bleed into it. It absolutely should. But again, like when we're talking tiers, I have like, just as an example, again, Paris Johnson is rated in a different tier for me than any of these pass catchers. That's just the example I'm giving. So I think that bleeds into it. I do think they would take Miles Murphy. And I don't again, Gutekunst does not give a shit what you people think, what we think. I am included in you people. We think, because he said, although it was kind of funny, I do remember last year they take Walker and Wyatt in the first round, and Pat McAfee, hi Pat, asks Rodgers, like, did you think this would happen or whatever? And he was just like, yeah, I could have had a feeling this might happen. It's like, Why are we talking like he's a victim for not doing that? But whatever. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But then they asked Gutekunst, like, do you have to tomorrow pick a player with WR next to his name? And Gutekunst, before the question was even finished, said no. And then 2 picks into the second round, he traded up and grabbed Christian Watson. I was like, okay, so you lied. Like, and we found out you were trying to trade into Minnesota. You lied. Like, that's what happened. And that's okay. Gutekunst doesn't owe us the truth by any stretch when it comes to strategy and stuff like that. What's he supposed to do? Like on Monday, he has his media availability. Is he supposed to say, yep, I want Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I want him at 13, and I want him bad. You know what's going to happen then? The team that wants him bad is going to say, hey, Houston, we'll give you this, and we're going to move up to 12. And guess who we're picking? Done.
Dude, I think Houston likes him. Like that's the team to watch. Honestly,
here's the reason I don't think Houston picks him, and I'll give you my reasoning. So number 2, there's all that discussion about them taking a defensive player now instead of a quarterback, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are not going into next season with Davis Mills as their quarterback.
Well,
that is not happening.
If you want to if it's JSN watch tomorrow and they take a defensive player at 2, that is good. That's good news for Green Bay. And Jackson Smith and Jigba being there at 13. So
yeah, if they were to make a move up, I think here's the thing: the furthest I would go in a move up is 10 with Philly, just because it wouldn't cost that much. And I just don't think the Packers aren't close enough for me to say give up 2 picks for this one player or 3 picks for this one player or whatever. Like, I just don't think Green Bay's in a position to do that. And there are players that I think will fall that are in a similar tier to Green Bay, and to where maybe, again, trading back is certainly the possibility. But that's where we're at. So we're going to do that. The Packers, if they draft Will Levis, I will eat my shorts. So I don't.
There is one quarterback in this draft that they could take, and I would just be like, well, okay. And that's Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, there's none of those guys for me. So again, and it has to do with the context of the pick. Dude, I understand the value of the quarterback position.
It would be, yeah. Well, and that's what it would be for the exact same reason I was fine with Jordan Love pick. Quarterback is the most valuable position in sports.
Yeah, and I understand that, but put your nuts on the table for this quarterback. You have to let him be the guy. Like and there's so much about being a franchise quarterback that you have to build your entire organization around this one guy. And that's part where like you kind of undercut him a little bit if you do that. So I don't think they'll do that. Sure. But let's get to it. This is the draft, which means we are taking 10 players. The winner of this competition, Morley, what did we decide on?
I don't know. We'll figure it out. Built bars or something.
$3,000. Yeah, last year it was a box of Built bars. We'll figure out something for this year. We didn't do
a bottle of whiskey of our choosing.
There we go. Let's do that. Let's do bottle of whiskey.
Whiskey bet. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
I'm a whiskey guy.
All right.
So I do appreciate that. We'll have a limit though. We've got to be like under $50 because that's
I'm not buying you I'm not going to make you buy me a $1,000 bottle of whiskey.
I wouldn't. So that's good news. I would just say nope. I'm welching on this bet. No.
Screw you. All right. First pick of the draft. I have to stick to my guns. I just called it. I'm taking JSN.
Sure, Michael Mayer.
Do you have this in front of you that you can see it, dude?
I cannot edit this sheet in front of me, but yes, I do have the ability to look at it.
Okay. There's no way we can like throw it on the screen, is there?
I can share my screen, sure can. Let's get to this. Then I will this is great radio.
People can watch me type. Just give me time to think. Who do I want?
I want to preview that tab, and there we go. All right. Can you guys see this screen? It's not that great, but the Morley's on the left. I'm on the right. He has JSN. I have Michael Mayer.
All right. I am taking with my second pick, and this is completely based off of what we just did. I'm taking Luke Musgrave, who is in green as a Packer people tier 1.
Got it. Okay. I will take Keaton Mitchell, the running back from East Carolina.
Oh, I see. You're going with the visits.
Not necessarily.
Maybe Dorf knows something, guys. That's the thing, too. He's oh, shucks, I don't know anything. Maybe he does.
I often say I know nothing. I pretend to know nothing. But if this happens, maybe I heard something.
Okay. With my third pick, I'll barf if this happens, but at least I will have gotten it right in the draft. I'm taking Keon White, who I am copying and pasting from the internet there.
Yeah. Rashee Rice.
Oh, dang it. Oh, damn it. You did it again.
Did what?
This is what you did to me last year. The guy that I called on the internet to be the pick, and then you sniped him from me. How do you spell Keon? What the heck?
Keion. Good Lord. What are you like? You're an elementary school, middle school teacher, for God's sake. You don't know how to spell?
Spell weird names.
It's Keon. That's not that weird. It's not like the kid from Northwestern, whose name I still can't pronounce.
Oh, yeah. Who I should take. I am going to take a friend of the podcast,
Cody Mock. Mock. I keep doing that. Okay, you've got Mock. I am going to go with Ben Sims, the tight end from Baylor.
I see you're hammering the 4th, 7th round draft picks, huh? Let's see. Who else do I like? Oh, I know who I like. Where is he? Come to me. All right, I'm going to take Dontrevion Wicks.
Sure.
Guy. Bona fide my guy in this year's draft class. Okay.
Sure. Jonathan Mingo.
Another tier 1 Packer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I actually didn't put that much thought into this year, Jacob.
You probably should have, because I'm going to kick your ass again.
I'm going to take the other tight end, the Cincinnati, Josh Wiley.
Damn it. That was on my list. I did put some thought into this. Okay. Let's see. I just had a guy in my Jervon Dexter.
Oh, I love him.
He's him. My if they take him at 45, everyone's gonna be like, defensive lineman, but I'm gonna be like, that dude is a fucking stud.
People are gonna do that till they watch him.
You know what? It's funny because I remember last year we did this whole thing, and I got friends, and we're just talking as fans or whatever. And before it's like, gotta go receiver, and then they take Quay and Devontae, and everyone's like, you know what? I really like both of those guys, and it's just like, well, yeah, like we're gonna talk ourselves into whoever the hell they pick. We know that.
Yeah, that's just part of it. But then when here's the thing that's always funny to me is like I will always talk myself into a guy, but then when they stink, I'm like, I should have just went with my initial. Like, I'm not saying Josiah DeGuara stinks, but I did not like him at Cincinnati. And then the Packers took him, and our pal who was on the show with us, Matt Lane, was like, "No, dude, I like him. He's a good player. You blah blah blah. Watch this game." I was like, "Oh yeah, he's good." He has not been good.
Which one?
I took Zach Pickens.
The
defensive tackle he's DT out of South Carolina.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go. Let's do FAU from Kansas State.
I'm just gonna type FAU.
Yeah, we know what it means.
Okay. I am going to take a running back. I'm going to take Roschon Johnson from Texas, the other Texas running back.
I'm going to take Evan Hull, the running back from Northwestern.
Is it Hull or Hull? It's Hull, right?
Hull, H-U, like Brett Hull hockey.
Yeah.
Did you play that game on Sega Genesis? You're old like me.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
How many picks do we have left apiece, just so everyone's aware here?
Well, I took 11 because they have 11 picks. So.
Okay, so we've taken 7 players apiece.
I'm going to take Jamie. Because they're going to take a safety.
Yep, Jamie Robinson is I'm going to take Howden, the safety from Minnesota.
Wow, why don't you just copy me from all my positions? I see how you won last year.
More like we literally talk every single day. Like I talk to you more than I talk to my wife.
Look at that tier 3 Howden. Yikes! I don't know about that.
Bisaccia.
That's true. I don't think he cares. Run fast, hit. He can do that. So we got 2 picks left each.
Mm-hmm.
I am taking Jake Witt, the offensive tackle from Northern Michigan.
I will take Miles Murphy.
Oh,
I can't believe we made it this far. I do remember though.
Great
last
value.
Year, yeah, right. Last year, your strategy was kind of like, since you're like, oh, people only really ever get like one. You were like, oh, just take like a bunch of guys I think they could take in the first round or the second round. And it's like they have 2 picks, so I'll hit one of these eventually. And then it didn't. I can't believe none of us freaking picked. Well, yeah, I can. That none of us had picked Devontae Wyatt. But then I was like, he's an old. He was all that stuff.
Yeah.
So this is our last pick a piece, right?
Yeah. And now, I'm thinking back on that first pick again. Guys that we have passed over. What would be the wackiest thing? Yeah, I'm just going to go with Darnell Wright. I don't think they're going to pick him, but that's probably why they will.
Right. Oh, let's see here.
This could be the one. Could be the one that makes you win it or lose it.
Right. I'm going to go with the homer pick. I'm going to take Luke Schoonmaker. Which Andy Herman, if you're listening to this, it's Schoonmaker, not Schoonmaker, damn you. I'm just kidding. I love you, Andy. But my soul dies a little bit every single time.
Hey. There he is. Yeah, he is a tier 1 Packer.
Yeah, I was picking, since we're done here and now this list cannot be edited, but I was picking in between him and Zach Kuntz.
Yeah.
But I was like, with the last pick, I'll go homerism a little bit. So I took Schoonmaker.
Let's talk about guys. So another guy that I think that should have probably been on our list, and I'm surprised neither, is Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin.
I was deciding between him and Jervon Dexter, but that's another one of those.
So him, Jervon Dexter, and Zach Pickens are 3 really high fits. But
the other one that's not on your list or any of our lists that I'm surprised is Isaiah McGuire.
Oh, yeah. Dang
the edge from Missouri.
Yeah, that would have been a great pick. I love Isaiah McGuire.
Justice! What's up, man? We should have had him.
Is he on here?
He just, you're not paying attention. He just said Merry Christmas Eve, man, and the same to you, my good friend. Yep. Speaking of guys that are dunking on Jets fans, my God, Justice had a freaking. This was like Josh Hamilton at Yankee Stadium in the home run derby.
That was some of the most fun I've had spectating on Packers Twitter in a long time.
God, it was great. And you know what's funny? Because Packers Twitter is usually just so damn toxic. Like usually they're ganging up on people for
we banded together to just piss on the Jets fans. Oh, JETS. Suck it. All right, dude. We'll get that tweeted out and I'll win this year. And the last 15 minutes of this pod have really just been for us. And if you're still here listening, we love you.
Yes, we do. So just a quick recap here. I unshared my screen, so I didn't do that. Morley has Jackson Smith and Jigba, Luke Musgrave, Keon White, Cody Mock, Dontavion Wicks, Josh Weil, which I think both of those guys are going to hit. So I'm going to be super pissed about that. Zach Pickens, Roshan Johnson, Jamie Robinson, Jake Witt, Darnell Wright. I am taking Michael Mayer, Keaton Mitchell, Rashee Rice, Ben Sims, Jonathan Mingo, Jervon Dexter, FAU from Kansas State, Evan Hall, Jordan Howden, Miles Murphy, and Luke Schoonmaker. So Morley, I got to tell you, coming out of this draft, I really do think you're in a better spot than I am. Just because I really wanted to take Josh Weil. I should have taken him where I took Ben Sims. That was a regret of mine that I now have. But that's okay. Maybe I owe you one to let you have there. So
you never know. You never know, man.
It's true. You do never know. I appreciate everybody for stopping by and sitting with us tonight. It's over. The pre-draft stuff is over. Enjoy going to watch the Bucks get eliminated. The one-time champion Milwaukee Bucks, when everybody acts like, no, I'm just kidding, guys. But like, it's not looking good. Just throwing that in there. But at any rate, the pre-draft stuff's over. I'm going to go watch draft day. I'm going to do my thing here with that I do every Draftmas Eve, which I said is go watch draft day and dream about whoever it is I think the Packers are going to pick tomorrow. There'll be plenty of content tomorrow. Check us out over here, over at Pack Report. Morley and I will be doing a bunch of stuff together. Official predictions. Morley says Jackson Smith and Jigba. I said they're trading down and taking Michael Mayer. We'll see who's right about that. We'll know pretty well too, because those are, I mean, oddly enough, our first round picks were the guys that we predicted for those first round picks. So, and then of course, like I mentioned earlier, Iowa Joe, Friday night, 6 p.m. Central Time. Outback Packers is doing a live stream, so go hang out with them. Check them out. We appreciate you guys for stopping by and hanging out with us all off season. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.